Say, man, you see my crab cakes?
And we're back. You're listening to the Talking Boxing with Billy C show. And it's time. It's time to shine that heavyweight spotlight on another heavyweight of years gone by. And joining me, my culprit in the heavyweight spotlight is my man Tony Triem. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, BC. How are you today?
I'm doing a little better now. And we got another request from a listener. As a matter of fact, this one's from Alex T. He likes to be referred to as the other Alex. And he says, have you guys ever done a feature on Stribling? Stribling.
Yeah, we have.
No, I know. He says, fascinating career. This was actually, he had answered the question. We had a trivia question, who went the longest without being knocked out. And he says, I know he never got a title shot, blah, blah, blah. He says, I always felt that Max Schmeling was an underrated fighter, and the fact that he knocked out Stribling supports that argument. He says, I think so anyway. He says, wow, when I look at Schmeling's record, he knocked out Mickey Walker, Joe Louis, and young Stribling. He says, that's an underrated fighter. Can you do a spotlight on Max Schmeling? So you and I talked about it, and we thought it was a great idea. This was a guy who was born in Germany in 1905. A lot of people remember him for his most famous fight, which we'll talk about in a second. But he actually started his career as a light heavyweight, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He was a light heavyweight of Germany or European light heavyweight champion, and he was also the heavyweight champion of Europe before he came over here and fought.
Yeah, he was. He started out as a light heavyweight, as a lot of guys did. And when we talk about these guys from the yesteryear in the heavyweight division, most of them all were light heavyweights. I know this is going to get off the subject a little bit of Max, but that was like the thing. Most guys fought at heavyweight, and it wasn't uncommon to see a guy that wasn't 200 pounds. Like Max Schmeling never fought. He never weighed over 200 pounds. I think the most he ever weighed was like 190-something, right?
Yeah, I think 195 is the most he ever weighed, Billy, but I'm not real sure. He was not a big man, though, for a heavyweight. The heavyweights back then were small compared to today's heavyweights.
Oh yeah. Oh, compared to today's, no doubt. Yeah, he was 6'1", and he was. Well, explain his style. Everybody remembers the Joe Louis fight, but if somebody said to you, "Hey, Tony, describe Max Schmeling's style," how would you describe it?
Well, I disagree with what most people say about his style, Billy. Most people that I can remember about reading about Max Schmeling they call him a robotic prize fighter. And I think that's the worst description of him I've ever heard. I don't know if you've ever heard him described that way or not, but I disagree with that so much. Max studied his prize fighters before he got in the ring. Every fight he had, he knew every flaw that fighter had. Max Schmeling had a plan when he got into the ring. Was he a fancy or a exciting fighter? No, he wasn't. But he knew the weaknesses of his opponents, and he didn't have a big knockout punch, which he knew. So he knew he had to wear his opponent down in order to win by a knockout or a decision. He had to outthink his opponent. He didn't fall into the traps of his opponents, of trying to lure him in for them to score heavily. He was a smart fighter. He was very, very ring savvy. And to call him a robot, I just don't get that. What's your opinion on that?
Well, maybe that was a term that they used for what we call today as a European style. I've heard people refer to the Klitschko brothers as robotic because they fight in that, or at least they used to fight more predominantly in a European style where they kind of stand up straight and, deliver things in a very robotic fashion, meaning that not fluid, not like what we would call a slick fighter. So maybe that was a term then. I never realized, I never really heard of him referred to as a robotic fighter. But an interesting point that you do make is that he He was a smart guy where he would research his opponents, and if we fast forward to his first fight with Joe Louis, that's exactly what had happened. He saw a flaw in Joe Louis's game that no one else had seen up to that point. And he was very patient in the ring, and he waited for that whole fight to just fall in front of him until he saw that opening. Well, what was the weakness? Tell us about the weakness and how he capitalized on that in that first Joe Louis fight.
Well, Schmeling watched films of Joe Louis and studied him like you said, and he said, I think I see something. And he never would reveal what he saw before that fight. He kept his mouth shut about it. He was smart about that. And what he saw was when Joe Louis would throw that left, and Joe had a beautiful left, he would drop that right hand slightly. And he kept studying that, and he came up with a plan where when Joe dropped that right, he threw that right of his, and down Louis went. And when he beat Louis that first time, he carried him to his corner. He had a lot of respect for Joe Louis. He that first fight when Schmeling beat him, he carried Louis to the corner.
Joe Louis was one of the most beloved fighters in the history of the sport, and we'll get to their relationship in a sec. But let's go back a little bit. After Max Schmeling left the light heavyweight ranks somewhere in 1928, his first heavyweight title was, like you had mentioned, he won the German heavyweight belt, similar to when he was a light heavyweight. First he took the light heavyweight belt, the German light heavyweight belt. He would go on to win the European light heavyweight belt. He got in the ring and rattled off 6 wins in the heavyweight division. 2 of them against some known guys like Johnny Risco and Paulino Yulzeldun, which he would fight several times. And that guy, if I recall correctly, now maybe I'm wrong, I'm not that familiar, but wasn't he an Olympian? Did he fight in the Olympics? Do you know of?
I don't know that, Bill.
Okay. For some reason, maybe I'm confusing him with someone else. But anyway, he got his shot at the world title against Jack Sharkey in 1930. And that went down as a disqualification. Tell us about that fight.
Well, that fight was based a lot on the referee, and it was kind of funny. I kind of got tickled at you last week when you was talking on your show about how you was beating these referees up, and Jim Crowley was the referee of that fight, and Sharkey hit him with a left hook that went real low, and Schmeling went down, and Jim Crowley was a referee, I believe, and he didn't see that punch, and he was counting Schmeling out, and the sportscasters and everybody in the audience was screaming and hollering, it was a foul, it was a foul, it was a foul, and he went over to the ring and listened to some sports writer, and he went back and reversed the decision and gave Max Schmeling the heavyweight championship of the world by foul.
Wow, I wonder how that would go over today. I mean,
that wouldn't work today.
Yeah, no, we complain.
That would not work today.
Not at all. Especially with replay and technology, and we complain a lot about decisions and refereeing and judging and all of that stuff. But it was no different back then, and as a matter of fact, the referees throughout the history, were responsible for a lot of things. I mean, someday we'll talk about guys going in the ring with pistols. This fight's over, waving his pistol around. But anyway, he won the title against Jack Sharkey. He went on to successfully defend it against our boy Young Stribling, and he would Stribling. I know. We always. I never remember which way to say it with you. But
it's Young Stribling, champ.
And then he had another fight, another one with Jack Sharkey that was again kind of controversial. That one went the distance, and again Max was awarded the decision. Tell us about that split decision win that he had with the second Sharkey fight.
Well, I only know of 2 Sharkey fights he had, Bill, and the second fight that I know of is when Sharkey won the heavyweight championship. I mean, Yeah, Sharkey beat Max Schmeling and won the heavyweight championship. That's the only two fights I know of, the one with the low blow. And then the second fight, Sharkey fights him, and he wins he loses the
on a
heavyweight.
split. He loses.
He wins the heavyweight championship from Jack Sharkey, and he loses the heavyweight championship from Jack Sharkey because Gene Tunney retired.
Exactly. Listen, I said the decision wrong. He lost a 15-round split decision on that one. Yes. Was that fight legitimately Jack Sharkey's?
Was that what, Bill?
In other words, was the decision justified? Did Max really lose that fight? It was a split decision. So obviously, the German
people. Well, it was
people.
controversial, and it's been a long time since I've watched that fight, Bill. So I from what I remember about that fight, and like I said, it's been a long time since I've seen that fight. From what I understand, it was very controversial. A lot of people thought that Schmeling actually did win it, but the decision went to Sharkey. And one of my favorite sayings that I say all the time to people, it really don't matter what we think. It's in the record book as a loss to Schmeling, so Sharkey's the winner,
Right.
There's not a whole lot we can say or do about it. We can bitch all we want, but when it goes in the record book, man, that's what it is.
Well, that was what I was alluding to. I know I threw you off when I said who won wrong. Originally I said Jack Sharkey won, but he lost. A lot of people thought that they kind of righted the ship because of the disqualification win the first time around, and it gave the fight to Schmeling. But that didn't stop him. However, he did have kind of a bad streak immediately following that fight. He fought Mickey Walker and knocked out Mickey Walker. But then, his next three fights, he lost two of them. One against Max Baer, where he was knocked out only one of 5 times in his career. And he followed that by a 12-round points decision to Steve Hamas. Then he had a draw against that same guy I asked you about before, Paulino Uzildon, before he rattled off another 8 wins before he would get a shot at Joe Louis, who had ended up beating Jack Sharkey for the title, right?
No.
Who beat Jack Sharkey for the title?
Primo Carnera.
Okay, right, and then Joe Louis killed Primo Carnera. Pretty much.
You're trying to mess me up today, aren't you? You're just trying to really. You're messing me up today, bro.
It's early for you. It's early for you, and I'm a little whacked out myself this morning. But but Joe Louis ended up with the title because he beat Max Baer, who he beat, right?
Right.
we knew that we were going to get to the bottom of that eventually. But this fight, let's talk about that second Joe Louis fight. There was a lot going on, of course, with Adolf Hitler and the stuff that was happening with Germany. And Max Schmeling had risen to the top again in the heavyweight division, and there was a lot of pressure on Max from Germany to come over here in the United States and beat not only the Americans, but to beat a black guy for that title. Why don't you tell us some of the stuff that was going on in the world and what the ramifications were surrounding this fight?
Well, Hitler was in charge, and Hitler built that fight. It was very, very racy. However you say the damn word.
Racist.
And it's very political. They wanted supremacy of the world, and Hitler, built this fight. It really built this fight up big, and of course America wanted our champion Joe Louis to win it, of course, and we was all behind him. And like I said, it was very racial due to Hitler, and political due to Hitler and the countries. And it's one of the shortest fights in the history of the heavyweight division, where Schmeling only threw one punch and he was knocked down 3 times. It lasted just a little over a minute. Joe Louis broke 2 of his vertebrae immediately after the fight. Schmeling had to go to the hospital. Hitler sent a letter to Schmeling's gorgeous wife after the fight, but never said anything to Schmeling or said anything to him. But Schmeling lost that fight. Lewis would not allow anyone to call him heavyweight champ until he revenged his first loss, and that first loss was against Max Schmeling.
Right.
And therefore, it was very important to Joe Louis to win this fight and to be known as the heavyweight champion of the world. And he couldn't be called heavyweight champ with that loss on his record. He had to revenge that, and he did, in a big style, as we all know.
Yeah, that was the only loss of his career going into this fight. He couldn't get it out of his mind, and then the pressure of him avenging that loss, like you say, plus the pressure of him, as unified. The United States was behind him, regardless of the color of his skin, and there was just so much pressure on him. But there was a lot of pressure on Max Schmeling as well, because his leader, Adolf Hitler, as you mentioned, was putting a lot of pressure on him to show that the Germans were the dominant race and everything else. And it was crazy because his wife, like you mentioned, was a beautiful woman. She was an actress in Germany, and they had that. It was one of the most worldwide spread played radio broadcasts of a fight. And they cut it off in Germany, and they did not even
played music.
Yep, and they did not even give the results. If I recall correctly, not for 24 hours, people didn't even know that he lost, and there were times, there were stories that they were trying to think of a way to make it like he won, and the other thing too, that surrounded that, when he went back to Germany. He was kind of like wondering if he was good, because at the time Max Schmeling also had a Jewish manager, didn't he? Didn't he have a Jewish manager, or his wife maybe had some Jewish ties, and that was always straining the relationship with the political party, and that was a whole nother thing. He wasn't so supportive of that party, so when he got back to Germany, things weren't exactly too smooth for him. I think they took a lot of his property and everything, right?
Well, yes. His manager was Joe Jacobs, and it was Jewish, and they wanted him to get rid of him, and Max wouldn't do it. He refused to do that. He kept that manager all the way through his career, and yes, that caused him a lot of grief and a lot of headaches, and because he wouldn't be a spokesman for the Nazi race, which Hitler wanted him to do. Hitler had him drafted into the paratroopers and sent him on suicide missions. Hitler really, for Schmeling to be the great hero of Germany, which he was, and they have beautiful monuments of him today and stuff, but in recognition of his greatness in the ring for Germany, and probably Germany's best fighter ever. They feel he went through a lot of real bad times and trouble over his non-compliance to the Nazis. He had a miserable time, but he's very wealthy.
Well, what we'll get to is what happened was he was wealthy before the fight. They did seize some of his properties, and like you said, he ended up serving the rest of the war for the Germans. After the war, he got back into the ring and basically had a 50-50 career. He was 33 years old when he fought Joe Louis in 1938. His last fight came at 43 years old in 1948. He retired from boxing, and Germany was in the process of being rebuilt and all this stuff. And Max Schmeling went to work for a company and ended up being the only guy interested in buying rights into this company. And I mentioned on a show earlier this week how smart of a guy was Max Schmeling to figure that this company that he got involved in would become as famous as it was and that company was Coca-Cola. And he ended up owning all the rights to every single bottle of Coke that was sold in Europe. And needless to say, this guy, when he passed away not that long ago in 2005, 7 months shy of his 100th birthday, a very rich man, Tony.
Oh, you bet. And a generous man, too, Billy. You know, I was reading an article, I think it was maybe a year ago, and it could have been longer than that. You know, I suffer from S&M syndrome. I have senior moments. But
I thought it was the other S&M.
I think I read this right, and maybe you can enlighten the listeners on this if I'm wrong. Schmeling befriended every one of the fighters he ever fought and helped them. He, you know, a lot of people here in Vegas credit Frank Sinatra for paying for Joe Lewis's funeral. In fact, that's not true. Max Schmeling paid for Joe Lewis's funeral here in Vegas when Lewis passed away, and he sent many, many, many gifts. And what I mean by gifts, it was money to Joe Louis to help him financially, and he helped all the fighters that he fought and befriended every one of them, and was a great guy. He was very generous. He was very generous to his fans. He would sign anything. He probably signed more autographs than anybody in the history of boxing. He loved his fans, and he never forgot his fans, but he also had the utmost highest respect for the men that stepped into the ring with him and would help him, any of them, in any way he could financially.
Yeah, he was a great person, and I know that as fact. That you know that's the way I take it. That Max Schmeling indeed paid for Joe Louis's funeral, and I also know that he had sent money very frequently to Joe Louis, especially towards the end of Joe Louis's life when he was pretty much broke. Max Schmeling would pick up the tab for a lot of his living expenses, especially when Joe was confined to a wheelchair for those the last part of his life. Max Schmeling made sure that he was as comfortable as he could be. The friendship that those two guys had together was amazing, and they rarely saw each other. That was the part that amazed me the most. They did see each other on occasion, but not as much as you would think, for as much as Max Schmeling reached out. So an amazing thing, and it just goes to show you that usually, Tony, when at the end of a fight, when two fighters embrace, you know, it means a lot more than just a show of sportsmanship. I think that fighters can only understand it, you know, what it's like to try and knock a guy's head off and then to respect him when it's over. And I think that those kinds of relationships are with you forever.
Oh, absolutely. And one thing I admired about Schmeling is he never cried when he lost the fight. He never made an excuse. He, like you've talked about and I've talked about so many times, you know, take it like a man, you know, and he did. If he lost the fight, he took it like a man, and he never bitched, he never cried, he never complained, he didn't make excuses. He was a great man in and out of the ring, and you've got to respect Max Schmeling as a prize fighter and as a man, and I do, and I think that he nowhere near gets the recognition he should get, and this is one of the reasons we do these spotlights, so we can remember these great guys of the past and in the prize ring. And so many people don't know what a great man he was and how generous he was to his fellow prize fighters, and you got to respect it, Bill.
No doubt about that, and just keep in mind, you know, on those days when things didn't go right, he didn't show it because he knew he was going to go home to that hot wife of his, and she was going to console him. So,
well, you know, and his wife Ann, they were married for 54 years.
I know.
And she was in the first Alfred Hitchcock movie that was a talkie, and it was the Blackmail, I think, was the name of the movie that she starred in. She was quite a gal, and he was only married once, and he outlived her by over 30 years, and he just idolized her.
Yeah, and you know, it's just amazing what they overcame, especially during that World War II thing together. And you know, if they weren't so prominent, Neither one of them would have lived as old as they did. It's just the way things unfolded with that. But Max Schmeling, another great heavyweight spotlight. He was a former world heavyweight champion. He was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 1992. Like I said earlier, he never weighed over 200 pounds, and like Tony said, he never even weighed 196. So 195 was the max. He lived almost 100 years old, man. He died when he was 99. He was born in 1905, died in 2005. Only 6'1", 472 rounds as a professional, 57% knockout ratio. He had 70 professional fights, 56 wins, 40 coming by knockout, 10 losses. He was only stopped 5 times, and he did have 4 draws. For a guy that wasn't known for a knockout punch, Tony, he had quite a bit of knockouts, 40 of 56 wins.
You bet he did, and he did it smart though, Bill. He wore his opponent down, like I said. He did not have that power punch like you like to see in heavyweights. He was not a Jack Dempsey, and he followed very closely behind Jack Dempsey, and he was just a great man in the ring. He was smart, and he did great things.
Jack Dempsey, the guy who knocked out Primo Carnero for the heavyweight title, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. He knocked out Primo Carnero, and Primo Carnero then rebeat Jack Dempsey, and he was the first man to ever regain the heavyweight title. If you buy that, I got some land I want to sell you.
Yeah, well, hey, you know what? I'm reading, looking at my notes, and I messed it. I threw us all off when I said, and he beat him the second time too. When I was referring to Jack Sharkey, when Jack Sharkey beat Max Schmeling, I had it the wrong way. But Tony, great job. Once again with the heavyweight spotlight, it's become our one of our favorites and the listeners as well. So we look forward to the next time, my man.
Thanks, Billy, and thanks, Alex T, the other Alex, for requesting this. I hope we answered some questions for him or straightened some stuff out on Max Schmeling for him. And if any of the listeners want to hear about any of the great heavyweights of the past, please have them drop you an email, and let's see if we can do it for them.
Sounds good to me, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
Ciao.
That's my man, Tony Triem. And like Tony said, hey, anybody you want to learn more about in the heavyweight division from yesteryear, just drop me an email, Billy@TalkinBoxing, TalkinBoxing.com. And Tony and myself would be glad to talk about it because, trust me, that's all we do is talk about fighters, fighters, fighters. Hey, we got to take a break. We'll be right back.